Good morning, everybody. As Matt said, my name's Aaron. I work with the Google Professional Services team across predominantly Asia, but also Australia, New Zealand, Japan, helping customers to essentially build up their SRE capability inside of their businesses. Okay, so that can be from people who are very mature with SRE practices already, but also organizations who are looking to start from the beginning. Okay, and sort of working with them and explaining to them how they can adopt SRE inside of their organizations. I joined Google about 5 years ago now, so I've held a multitude of different roles there at the moment, which I think probably is very similar to a lot of you in the room, where your SRE experience is also essentially how much prior experience have you got up and what sort of battle scars have you worn as well. So our discussion today is around what we call the reliability map. Okay, so the reliability map, right, just to be clear, this isn't about me standing up here and spruiking a Google product. Okay, this is not a Google product. This is a call for participation around an open source project that we have at the moment, which is about how do we map out the capabilities that organizations are looking for when they talk about SRE, okay? If it sounds like I'm never spruiking a product, or we want to spruik a product, we need to do that in the form of capabilities. What capabilities are we ultimately providing? Okay, so I hear this pretty much every single day, with the exception of it actually being Food Corp. But I need help with SRE. I need help with reliability or DevOps or a platform. I need some form of help. I've heard about SRE. I believe that it works for me. But what do I do next? Perhaps they may have come to a conference and the conference finishes up on a Thursday, and then they call up someone like me on a Friday to say, hey, what's my first step? What do I do? Okay, so sometimes, and I'd probably say more often than not, they actually don't know what problem they want to solve. Okay, what problem they want to solve first. And that can be a problem when SRE is a very, very broad topic area. So what are we actually talking about? Are we talking about velocity? Are we talking about instrumentation and observability and monitoring? Is that where your capability gaps lie? Maybe you need to have better incident response. Okay, that's definitely a first point of order, because sometimes when a customer phones us up to talk about SRE, the first time it actually gets some real good momentum inside of a business is actually in response to an incident that wasn't handled in a way that you would want to handle it from a business perspective. And so this large space, where do you actually even start? If someone says to you, okay, I want to look at capacity planning, well, there's a lot of different white papers out there, there's a lot of different material, but is there a sort of a central point? Is there a central roadmap to try to help a person who may be not as experienced in SRE to start with those capabilities? And often, and this can be a bit dangerous, which is, can't you just tell me what to do? Okay, so telling people what to do. We've been telling people what to do in tech for years, and we like to call them best practices. Okay, now best practices, they're not necessarily wrong, are they? But if you're asking for, tell me best practices for operations, tell me best practices for monitoring, tell me the best practices for reliability, okay, best practices, best practices, best practices. How useful are they? What do they need to be useful? Do you run the danger of cargo culting, just basically following the steps without necessarily understanding why you need that capability in the first place? And so this is where we get to the point of context matters. Okay, so when we're talking about a solution, okay, be it like a very sophisticated technical solution, or maybe it's just something as basic as, how do I get a more effective instrumentation or observability in my system? Context matters, okay? So how do you figure out the best practice for you? if you don't understand the context, and in this example, that might be the environment that you're finding this problem existing in. From a technological perspective, that might be, do I have an Ubuntu-based environment or a container-based environment? Or maybe there are socio-technical sort of challenges, which is, do I have a global team, okay, in a follow-the-sun operational model that I now need to resolve a best practice for handing over in a follow-the-sun? How do I hand off, okay? So those types of contextual concerns, without them, we only ever can guess at what solution to offer, okay? And so what we need to do is we need to extract that context. So that's generally most of my job, is as we try to figure out how to help the customers, like what context is your problem operating in, okay? Is your problem operating in, again, that global context? Is it a very specific technical issue that you're facing? And so as we resolve that, we can then narrow down to a known set of problems. And so once you're able to narrow that down, all of a sudden what we know as best practices get a little bit more useful, okay? And they get more useful until a point where they can serve as a guide for what you want to do, and then ultimately you take that next step to implement it and determine through your own feedback process whether or not that actually worked for you. Because, you know, how many times has anyone tried to implement a best practice straight up off a blog or a site and just figured out that, you know what, I spent more time configuring this thing and adjusting it than I did actually reading the best practice in the first place? Okay, so one other point I'll just get to here is when you have a known set of solution, we might have a bias to build, but there's also can be justification to buy as well. And as long as you're going through that process of understanding the context, then you can know which one to do, okay? So, no conference talk is complete without a really strained analogy. And so congratulations this morning, I'm going on a road trip with you all. Okay, so maps, road trips kind of seem to go together. So, road trip, where do we want to go? Right? Well, you want to have a destination in mind. Sometimes, as strange as this sounds, you end up having conversations with the business as, oh, I thought it was agile, I thought we didn't need to have a destination. Well, you can adjust, but still a good idea to at least have some view of to where you want to go, lest you end up needing to spin around and make corrections constantly. Okay, where are we starting from? So from an SRE capability perspective, you might have exceptional observability, but do you have the team behind you to use that observability when there is an incident? Okay, is it a follow the sun model? How is your on-call rotation going? Do they have access to the right type of playbook when they need it? What is then the next step? So when you identify that gap of capability, where do you then need to focus that attention? Okay, where are you going to get the best bang for your buck? And then, of course, how do we know when we're off course? And one thing is that a lot of these organizations already have a platform, okay? Unless you're in sort of like very new sort of startup territory, you're often not looking at completely green fields environments. Often you're actually already using a platform, be it, you know, again, a sort of a container platform, or maybe it's a HPC platform or something like that. But it's also the team and the structure, okay, of your organization that helps you to basically solve those problems. It's that teamwork, it's that ways of working that solves that problem, platform rather, than just purely technical. So, how does your code get into production? How does your team do incident response? All these things are positions on a map, okay? If we're talking about how to build SRE capability within an organization that's not already doing it, speaking in these terms helps them to understand more clearly, okay, and develop SRE in an organization. Also, don't get analysis paralysis, okay? Don't go and try to optimize everything prematurely, all right? That, like, it's perfection is the enemy of good. You know, I've heard that said many, many times. And it's essentially, don't build out that 4-year plan. And you might be thinking, hold on a second, he just told me that I need to have a plan. Well, it's actually, don't have a plan where you have every single pothole or road marker on that plan. You still need to know where you're going, but just don't overdo it, okay? And the reason is, if you start to do that, it starts to become longer and longer before the business starts to see the value out of SRE. And getting SRE and supporting it in whatever manifestation for that business that works for them, you want to make sure that you're doing it quickly and following that sort of continuous improvement method. And so to do this, isn't it best to be able to consult a map of those capabilities? Okay, so brace yourself, because until then you're probably thinking, what the hell is this guy talking about? So, if any of you are like me and subscribe to the Coke bottle theory of glasses, this will be essentially just a eye test, okay? So don't bother about trying to figure that all out. Even if you walked up closely, I don't even think the JPEG resolution is going to be really that helpful. But, and I'll show you this in action a little bit later. But what we're doing here is essentially mapping out, very similar to a skill tree type of model for how do I adopt SRE to improve my reliability position? What type of investments do I need to make in those capabilities? Okay, and try to communicate to businesses that 100% or 99.99999%, it's not always achievable or needed. Okay, there are good exceptions to that rule. I would like to think that pacemakers and that type of thing do have that, but there's a significant amount of investment to justify each tranche, okay, each column here. And so what you're seeing here also is that as we go from 90 to 90%, each of these columns represents on average a 10 times cost increase, okay, about how much investment do you put into reliability. And when we start to get to the map, and I'll flick over to the map in a second, but what is the capability? What do we actually need? Okay, put yourself, if those of you, probably experienced SREs, but put yourself into the shoes of maybe it's the technology manager at an organization. Maybe it's someone who's looking to set up an SRE practice in their own organization. What capabilities do I need to do first? What do I do when I go to work tomorrow morning and start talking about the things that I saw at SREcon and try to lift up that capability? Well, let's have a look. And if I can just... So this is, if anyone wants to, go across to the r9y.dev. Let me just zoom this in for you. Okay. And so this is essentially a mapping. Each column, which is essentially demo, okay, I need 90% type of reliability. I then want to move into a deterministic model. How does that path, what type of things do I need to invest in as a capability? Okay, I'm starting to get code reviews. I'm starting to get semi-automated integration, okay? And as we sort of go into reactive and well-engineered software, it's the type of capability that, well, now I've got these base things set. Now I can start to preempt reliability concerns inside of my software. And so how do we use this? Well, oh no, I've got no internet. Aha, but I prepared for it. All right, so when you click it, thank you very much. So when you click through to the GitHub repo, what we have is a description, okay, of the general capabilities, okay? What are the prerequisites? What do we need? What do we mean by centralized log collection, okay? For any vendors out there in the audience as well, this is where, what capabilities does your software or your solution provide? Not necessarily to put the product card in there, but to describe the types of tools that are available to achieve that capability. We're looking for that collaboration, right? This is very much a early stage project. And so, for instance, you'll notice here, lots of TBCs. So we are looking for that collaboration. So if anyone wants to get on GitHub, raise a pull request, be able to contribute, maybe where there's a gap, maybe something's missing, you'll probably find a lot of lorem ipsum. This is, again, very, very early stages. But the goal, again, is to, let me switch back to the presentation. The goal is to create a map that is able to communicate to SREs and non-SREs alike. For instance, how would you like to have that roadmap discussion with the head of development who doesn't necessarily understand what is needed when they're saying they want 99.99%? Okay? It sounds like a really easy round number to have. I've had that discussion / debate / argument with development managers, you know, again and again throughout the career. But generally speaking, if I've got some data to support the position of what we need and to show that there is a plan on how to get there, generally speaking, those discussions end well. Okay, and you see some adoption. So I mentioned before that it's pre-alpha. I guess you could put it. It's not done. Okay, this has been under construction now for the better part of probably about 6 months. So you'll still probably find lots of lorem ipsum, etc., etc. If you don't, you might not even necessarily agree with the point of centralized logging, or you might not necessarily agree with the capability of smoke tests being needed in the deterministic stage. Well, raise a pull request. Pull it back. The community basically helps to pull this out and to decide where it fits. So as time goes on, in smaller increments, we essentially get a consensus of what type of things do we need to do to get to that SRE capability. And for, again, any big gaming nerds like me out there, so Civ, I wanted to see whether or not Civ tech trees were still trendy. I then looked it up on the internet and realized that Civ tech trees were never trendy. So, that was not something I really needed reminding of. But again, sales pitch goes here. Well, again, happy to have collaboration from the solution providers out there and the vendors out there. But we want to see these capabilities as cloud and vendor agnostic. Okay, so you have a capability, I want to have centralized observability. The way I might execute upon that is with, say, a cloud operations suite, or with a Datadog or something like that. That's a way to execute on that capability, but it's not you need that product. Okay, that's something that we don't want to get to. And so one of the other things as well is if you are a vendor and you're looking to contribute, don't downvote or try to delete your competitors' references as well. That's karma's a real thing. Okay, so how do I use it? And again, this is just for illustration purposes, but it's a mapping. Okay, we talked about context at the beginning of the chat, and we were talking about where do we start? Well, you've got the capabilities. Honestly speaking, what capabilities do you have right now? And remember, a lot of these capabilities, they're technical in nature, but they also require the people to be able to do those things. It's not so much to say, yes, I have smoke tests, but only maybe one person in the team is ever running a smoke test. Or I've got unit test coverage, but only one development team is actually really following that well. So you've got that, again, that sort of people capability consideration to make. And so once you know what type of capabilities that you have in your platform, you can decide, where do we start? You have that conversation. Where do we start? Where do we start picking up the capabilities? If it's a smaller capability, you might be able to adopt that as a small 20% Friday project, implement it relatively quickly. But more often, the reasons why you haven't implemented these other larger ones is because you need to ask for investment from the business to support SRE adoption. And so once we start talking about asking for money, people close up their wallets pretty quickly unless you've got some good justification for it, okay? And this will help you to do that because you're starting from an open source, vendor agnostic capability discussion, okay? If anyone has ever read the DevOps reports and assessments type of material around capabilities and high performance, low performance, this has been influenced by that, okay? And so what, right? I stand up here, I talk to you for a while, and then, you know, what do you do tomorrow? What do you change? Well, by using this, you can have two types of insights. You can get tactical, okay? So what type of short-term things do I need to focus on to achieve generally that capability tranche that you find yourself in already? But then you've also got strategic, so you've got a roadmap, you've got the starts of a proposal you can bring back to the business for longevity in SRE and that investment. And I know talking about money and investment generally is a bit of a yawn fest, but honestly, if you want to see that 99.99 and very, very efficient teams, it requires investment. Investment's made with money, okay? So what next, okay? We've got essentially, it helps you do that self-assessment, really. I think that's the big takeaway from this slide here is be honest, where are your capabilities now? And it might be stronger in some teams than other teams, okay? So each team, you can run this analysis for yourself. How can I help? So it's available on GitHub, okay? So if you just go to r9y.dev, because it actually sounded like a really cool acronym when we coined it, but I'm not sure the world's ready for another numerical acronym. But essentially go there, contribute, have a read. If you find that there's a gap or something of a project that you're focused on, that will be fantastic. We've got a Discord as well, so please join us there, okay? Have a debate. Thank you. I've already told you vendors what to do anyway. So look, in conclusion, all right, it's a very, very big space. A lot of us have got expertise in SRE already, and we forget just how intimidating the vastness of that space can be. So how do we start to build up our capabilities and build up the practices in our organization? Okay, so we have that big map, all right? For those of you, there's a good little Easter egg I think if you click the minus, it goes into this weird Jurassic Park mainframe type of GUI. If you ever want to impress an executive, show the map in that mode. They all love the Jurassic Park Unix operating system. Don't go and buy some nines, right? It's all about building capabilities. And if you're not sure where to turn, consult the map, okay? And if you're still not sure where to turn, you can turn to me in my consulting practice. Shameless plug over at Google Cloud. Look, thank you all very much. I believe we still might have some time for questions, and I hope to see a few of you on r9y.dev helping to make some contribution. Thank you.